Hello and welcome back to the History of Video Gaming. My name is Ben and I am joined by the one and only Wes. What's up, Wes? How you been?
I am doing great. I don't know, man. Just games and stuff, basically.
Yeah.
In these strange stay inside times that we're in. Also, appreciating not having to go outside that much when it's freezing cold out. So there's a silver lining there.
Yeah.
But how have you been doing?
I'm okay. Christmas is around the corner, right? So I'm kind of already in half vacation mode, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So, yeah, my body wants to just lay around all day. And the fact that it gets dark really early now, it's like I want to go to bed at like 6 p.m.
I feel that for sure.
Yeah, it's been a strange week, but it's been good, I guess. Nothing crazy's happened, so I guess that's good.
Yeah, sometimes nothing too exciting is good, and that is a very odd segue that I could talk about what I've been playing this week. If
Oh yeah, what have you been playing?
More the same. That's what that segue was supposed to be.
Oh, okay.
So I've been playing Star Citizen still, dedicated to the grind for now, and definitely took me longer than like if I had just been like I want to get to it as fast as I can. But I got the ship I wanted. Got the in-game currency to get the Cutlass, the 2-seater with cargo space and a turret. And oddly enough, right after I bought it, I was like, I think I'm going to take a break from playing for a little bit. And I haven't even like spawned it and flown it yet. But the weird thing is, one of the best ways to make money right now in the game is to buy this little 1-seater land vehicle that mines on planet surfaces and ferry it around by renting a Cutlass, the ship that I just bought, for like one day, and just you make back your money pretty fast if you play for like 2-3 hours for what you just spent on renting the Cutlass. And like after 1 to 2 days of a little bit of gameplay, you make back the money for the mining vehicle too. So in a weird way, I've been flying the Cutlass for like 4 days because I've been mining with it so I could earn money to buy a Cutlass.
Right.
Which is very strange. It's a little better than the fact that before that I was bounty hunting and just blowing up countless Cutlass so that I could buy a Cutlass.
Right.
Which is also weird, but I'm really glad to have it. I'm excited that it's sort of mine, given that I bought it with in-game currency and we're still in alpha, so there's going to be wipes. But on that note, part of the reason I took a break is that Star Citizen, apparently they want to release the new patch 3.12 before Christmas, which is in a couple weeks. And in a recent live stream, they answered a bunch of questions. The patch sounds really exciting, and they were kind of explaining, we don't like to wipe the game, but if we feel that it's going to reset the economy in a way that gives us more information and makes it more fair to other players and stuff like that, we will wipe it. So someone said, so have you decided whether or not you're going to wipe for 3.12? And they said, no, we don't know yet.
Oh, no.
And I'm perfectly fine with the idea of the progress I went towards to get that Cutlass being wiped. But I thought I had a little bit more time, than it's probably been about a month that I've been playing it for. And I'm just at this point, I might wait until they decide whether or not they're going to wipe for 3.12 before I play again. Because all I would be doing is making money with the Cutlass so I could buy like a new fighter ship or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a little frustrating. I knew what I was getting into. I knew that before I finished my grind for the Cutlass, but I was like, I at least want to check that box off and say like, yeah, I did it before I stop, even if it is going to get immediately wiped. So for right now, pretty content where it is, but I think I'm going to take a break. Otherwise, the time I spend in it might feel a little wasted, as I'm sure you know, because that's part of the main reason you're staying away from the game still.
Right, yeah. Yep, I'm gonna wait until some of their major features are in. The big ones I think are like server meshing, and there's like 1 or 2 other like big back end things. Once those are in, I think I'll be in it, but
yeah.
Or maybe when the single player launches, because that's supposed to come out first, I think.
Yeah.
Who knows when, but
yeah, exactly. Not sure how far out that is, but I'm excited about the single player because, a lot of the bugs you have to figure or hope are because of like this gigantic multiplayer environment that they're creating. So I could see it being hopefully a nice like contained, solid experience. But either way, I'm excited to get back into the multiplayer because I'm, fingers crossed, like, if they wipe, it's not like they're going to wipe again in a month, right? But I'm definitely gambling a little bit. So we'll see after 3.12 launches whether it wipes or not, whether I get back into it. But I definitely had a good time with it. Going to take a break for a little. I'll have to check back in next time I play it and see if I still have a ship.
Yep. All right, nice. I've also been doing more of the same.
Oh, okay. That's fine by me.
I want to say quickly, I've been playing a lot more chess. Our friend of the podcast, Chris, has actually gotten into chess. And I've been playing with him a little bit, which has been really fun. And just sparked me on even more. So I've been doing that, but there's not too much to say. I have been getting better. But let me talk about Star Wars Dark Forces 2, which I think I started last week.
Yeah.
But now I'm a good, I'd say almost 2/3 way through the game. And it's a pretty good game. I'm not gonna lie. It is weird. It's the story doesn't seem as like grand as the first game. The first game you basically, it wasn't the same as destroying the Death Star, but you kind of destroyed a big super powerful weapon, you know?
Right, yeah.
And on this game it's like, this guy stole a map and now you're chasing him. And we're doing that for like hours and hours. So it feels like a little different, but it's still really fun. I got the lightsaber and I have some force powers now, but honestly the lightsaber isn't very good if you're versing more than like one person. I feel like the lightsaber gameplay that I remember is from the newer games. So on this one you have like a normal attack and then an alternate attack, which I don't know what the difference is. But I don't know, you get shot on your way to two people a lot. You can deflect the shots of people shooting at you if you like face directly at them, but that means that anybody, if there's more than one person, you're gonna get shot. So it's a lot easier just to kind of poke around corners with a gun and get people that way.
Right.
So I guess it's a fair. I don't know. I was kind of looking forward to lightsabering some people, but the game's pretty fun. I haven't had any major issues with it. I wish the environments were a little bit more different, like they were in the first game. The first game, they took you to like an ice planet, and then you went to a pirate base. It was like all over. On this one, it's a lot of like in service tunnels and storage facilities, and like there was a whole level that took place throughout canals, I guess.
Okay.
But there's not a whole lot of like environment. It's a lot of like gray boxes. There's been some very small like buildings and stuff, like little cities, I guess, but it's really restrictive as to where you can go. Whereas in the first game, it was linear, but you had a lot of different ways you could approach an area. And on this one, you really can't do that. So that's felt a little different. But yeah, I'm looking forward to the end. I'm still a little bit away from it, but it'll get done. I think by next week it'll be done, and then I can move on.
Nice.
Yeah, it's been fun, but not too much new to add, really.
Right. So is your character a Jedi in this, or are you just like some person who also has a lightsaber?
I'm not really a Jedi, even though I have some force powers now. Like, no one's trained me. Like, I think my dad like left me a lightsaber, and then somehow I'm just, attuned to the force and I can do some stuff. There's a whole light side, dark side mechanic, but even though I'm like more than halfway through the game, it hasn't activated yet. I really hope it's not because I'm like in the middle and somehow I've stayed in the middle throughout the game.
Oh yeah.
I really hope it's just it unlocks later, but we'll see about that. That might be something I should look into quick before I start playing again.
Right before you beat the game and you realize you missed out on a key gameplay feature or something.
I was wondering how you do light side and dark side in a game with like no dialogue or choices,
Right.
But I think it's literally just there's a bunch of neutral characters that, it's like the barkeeper or, some farmer. And it's like, I think like that whole system is do you just ignore them or do you go around killing them? I guess that would make you evil. So
Right.
I think that's what it is, but I've killed a couple of them because they were in my way, but I don't think I've been particularly evil.
Wow.
Hey man, sometimes you gotta do it for the speed run.
Man, I guess so.
But why don't we get into the special topic today, Wes? We've got a really awesome one. I think I've been looking forward to this episode for a while. We had the RCA Studio 2.5, 2 weeks ago. Then we had the RCA Studio 3. And now we've got a brand new second gen console that's actually good and going to be around for a little while. So why don't you get us started with talking about the Astrocade?
Yeah, so this is what we're going to be talking about today, the Bally Astrocade, which has a couple different names. So I wanted to start off with that. When it was first released by Bally in 1978, it was called the Bally Professional Arcade. And then for whatever reason, I don't know if the sales weren't great on this or what, but Bally said, I don't really want to sell it anymore. And they decided to get rid of it and sell the property to somebody else in 1979. So then it was picked up by a company which I think was called Astrovision, who resold it in 1981 as the Bally Computer System, and then renamed it to the Astrocade in 1982. So it's been through a couple different names, but Astrocade, for one, is the coolest, and maybe because of that, is kind of what this console is known as through its whole life, even though for the next couple of years it's going to be the Bally Professional Arcade. And it's got a lot of cool capabilities to it, too, which, Ben, do you want to start talking about the hardware that this had?
Oh, yeah. And I think for this, it's going to be best if I just compare it to the 2600. That is the best console on the market right now. So comparing these two is very interesting to me. Let's start with RAM. The 2600 had 128 bytes of RAM in the console, but then another 4K bytes of RAM on the cartridges. So the cartridges had a lot of the power there. For the Astrocade, there's 4K RAM in the console, and then the cartridges could do 8K RAM on the cartridges. So it's more than double what the 2600 could do for RAM. For the CPU, I thought this was kind of really interesting. The 2600 used the MOSTEC 6507 chip, which had a processing power of 1.19 megahertz. But the Astrocade uses the Zilog Z80, which is actually a CPU that we're pretty familiar with from like microcomputer systems.
Right.
And that had a processing power of 1.789 megahertz. So again, it's pretty significantly higher. It's a, what is that, like it's like 30% higher, something like that, for the CPU power. And then for resolution, the 2600 is variable, but a good like approximation is around 80 pixels. Again, the Astrocade is variable. It actually had a high resolution mode and a low resolution mode that could be switched between the games depending on what other problems the games had, if they had a lot of moving sprites or something. So a good approximation for the resolution for the Astrocade is around 102 resolution. So when you think about 1080p in YouTube or something, scale that down to what was it, 240p is like one of the lowest you can go to. This is 102 for the Astrocade, but it's still better than the 2600.
Right.
And then for sound, again, the 2600 had 2 sound channels of 1-bit pitches, and I'm not really sure what 1-bit pitches means, but the Astrocade had 3 sound channels with 8-bit pitches. So it could do a lot more in the sound department as well. And then finally for colors, this one was hard to look up. I know the 2600 is capable of displaying like 120 different colors, but obviously it couldn't do that all in like a single game. The Astrocade can only display 4 to 8 colors per game, but I think those 4 to 8 colors can be 4 to 8 in like from anything. So again, maybe it had like 120 colors it could choose from, but then it could only do 4 to 8.
I think from what I found, it was 256, or at least somewhere around there. Probably like a pretty standard like color palette,
Right. So that's still, I mean, even if it matches the 2600, it's still pretty crazy.
Right.
one thing I did read was that the 2600 used sprites more than the Astrocade. The Astrocade had to like move things using its RAM instead of like sprites. I don't really know the terminology that well, but one thing is for certain, and that's that the Astrocade is a beast.
Yeah.
And could do a lot both in sound and graphics. I think, when I listen to people talk about the Astrocade, they always say, maybe the games on it weren't like the best games of this era of all time, but they looked the best. It was a really beast console and it could do just about anything. As far as what the actual console looked like, it's kind of standard black with a wood grain finish around it. You had a calculator keyboard thing on there for some reason. I don't think any of the games used it, but maybe the math games did.
I think, probably just the calculator game that I'll very briefly talk about.
Yeah. And then the controllers are very strange looking to me. It's almost like the handle of like a gun or something with a trigger, but then at the top you've got like a dial, which I'm not sure if that dial maybe also pushes in or something. It's apparently pretty comfy, but it definitely feels like it's mainly being held with one hand and the other hand's just kind of hovering.
Right, yeah.
It's okay, I guess. It didn't sell near as well as the 2600, so it doesn't have as much information and love for it around as the 2600, but certainly when it came out, it was pretty beastly. And also, I want to say maybe one of the reasons why that was is because it was originally supposed to come out in '77, probably right around the time of the 2600. And then when the 2600 came out first, they were probably like, whoa, we should like rethink some things and make sure that ours is better. That's what I think happened. But the first units that were like released to stores were in April of '78, which is right where we are in the timeline. So yeah, it's a pretty big beast.
Yeah, and I did have just a couple weird tidbits to throw in that I found, and some of these are just like random throwaway lines that I saw in the Wikipedia article I was reading about it. So I don't know. I don't have much information to back them up, but it did say you could upgrade this to be a personal computer, which confuses me, but considering it ran on a Zilog Z80 microprocessor, it kind of makes sense. Sort of had the hardware there, so I guess I don't know what other elements you would need to add, but you could just like make it a computer instead, which is weird but funny. And also there was a basic programming language cartridge that was also sold that you could plug in so that you could code in BASIC on the Astrocade. But the way that they did it is using the calculator keyboard that they had, which obviously couldn't do like the full QWERTY keyboard. So they had this plastic overlay that you put over the screen that said like number 5 means M or whatever. And there would be like modifier keys, I guess, like, you'd hold the plus button and it would change 5 to mean Q instead or something like that. To be able to do the full keyboard, which seems like unbearable to me, but people did code games for this, and I think they used that basic cartridge. So at least some people were able to use that calculator keyboard to actually program on it too.
Yeah. And one thing I forgot to say, if anybody listening thinks Bally, have I heard that name before? Hopefully you have, because Bally actually owns Midway. So just about all the games that we're going to be covering today were actually Midway arcade games, and then were ported to this console. So this console is called the Professional Arcade, and that's because it was literally like a home console that could play all the Midway's games on it.
Yeah.
And also because of that, all the names for all these games that we're going to be seeing today, they're just the names of the Midway games because they had the license behind like the actual names of those games. So they could just do like, this is the official version, which is pretty cool.
Yeah. And I think with that, if you're good to go, Ben, we should just start talking about these games because we got a lot of Bally stuff to look over today, and it's pretty great.
Let's do it.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back from that break. And if we didn't get you excited enough already with the Bally Astrocade, we don't want to leave you hanging. So we are going to get straight into all of the games that we are going to be covering in this episode. So the way that we split it up, we have a few that we know were released with the console. So we can say for sure that those were April of 1978. But then the rest of them, we just know are 1978. So like we've done with previous consoles, we split them up throughout the year. We're doing half of them now and half of them later. And we kind of tried to pick the more simple ones to talk about now so that we could talk about some of the more advanced ones later. And hopefully we'll have seen some other console games down the timeline, so we'll have another fresh look at the Bally Astrocade in 1978 and kind of its context instead of looking at them all right now. And as we go through these, all of the names, if they sound familiar, it is because since this is Bally and Midway, they could just straight up use the names of the games that they made. So some of these we covered, and then some of them we just honorable mentioned, but a lot of them should sound pretty familiar to you. And I guess with that, it's time to get straight into it, right?
Oh, yeah.
So to start off, I'm going to be talking about two different cartridges. The first one, which had Gunfight and Checkmate on it, which was released with the console, and then the second one, which had Seawolf and Missile on it, which came at a later date. And with all of these, they have really great cartridge art, pretty similar to the Fairchild style, and that just late 70s, like, not really pastel colors, but it looks pretty good. You should look up some pictures of them. But since I have so many games to talk about, I did want to get straight into it and just start describing them all and then get into my ratings. So let's start off with the Gunfight and Checkmate cartridge, which I want to mention right at the top also came with calculator and scribbling, but they are just exactly what you think. No games involved. Calculator is a calculator, which is nice, I guess. And scribbling you could draw, which might have actually been pretty cool, given the fact that you could do a decent amount of colors on this console, but still just sort of drawing, not really a game. But then the video games, Gunfight, of course, we love Gunfight. And what is amazing, and what you'll probably hear us say many times through this review, is that it's just Gunfight. Like, it's not Gunfight on a console that kind of sucks. Like, you can tell it's a little bit less detailed, but it's basically just Gunfight, which is kind of crazy.
Yeah.
A nice addition to this being a home console is that you can set the score limit before you start. But just a reminder of what this game is, and to reiterate all the stuff that this console has in it. There's an ammo count for your cowboy at the top of the screen. There's cacti, trees, a moving wagon in the middle of the screen that can get in the way of your shots. And the obstacles that spawn on the screen per round either depend on the amount of rounds that passed or the amount of points you had, but I think it's exactly the same to how it worked in the arcade game, where first there's this cacti, then there's cacti and trees, and then there's the moving wagon in the center. For both the cacti and the trees, they get destroyed partially if they're hit, and they block the shot, so you have like a little bit of cover that you can break away and shoot past. Both players do this like typical cowboy shootout walk off the side of the screen for each round, which is pretty nice. And you respawn after any time someone is hit. And the bullets bounce off of the bottom and top of the screen. And all of those, I'm pretty sure, were exactly the same in Gunfight. Although this one has color, which is a big difference.
Yep.
But it also has some of the other things that we really loved about the original Gunfight. It has the funeral march when one of the players dies, and it has a different classical song, I think, when the other player dies, which I'm guessing was in the original as well, but I can't remember. And also it has this nice animation of the cowboy falling down in like 2 or 3 different frames, and then his hat on his chest. So that's Gunfight as far as what the gameplay is. Moving on to Checkmate. Checkmate we didn't cover in depth because it's a blockade clone. And when we were in 77, there was every single week at least like 3 blockade clones.
Right.
So not really worth talking about the incremental changes that we saw in them. Although this one did have some nice visuals and like an explosion effect when you ran into a wall or another player, which I don't think we really saw in Blockade. So interesting to note that that was in the original Checkmate as well, and it is carried over into this. Now this is maybe not as impressive as Gunfight, just because it's a little more believable that a console in 1978 could run this type of game, but it's still really visually impressive. It runs really well. There's basically 2 different colors and 2 different shapes that they switch up so that you can distinguish 4 different players on the screen, and it works really well. You can pretty easily make out which each player is, and it also moves really fast, which I'm so thankful for, because I think a really fast pace is part of what makes these snake blockade type games fun. And with so many consoles, it's just like the arcade version except slower, because it can't like refresh the frames as quickly. Mm-hmm. But this moves really fast, and it even does the same thing where as soon as a player dies, because it can kind of refresh the other 3 players quicker, the whole game speeds up. And when you're just 2 players, it moves really fast. It gets pretty hectic. So that's really good. It also has the different sounds for each player moving in different directions, which is great. And of course, the small explosion, which I just mentioned, and a flashing screen when the player hits a wall. But in the same vein as Gunfight, the arcade for Checkmate was black and white, and this is in color. So it's almost even better than the arcade cabinet, which we don't get to say very often.
Yeah.
And another interesting change in the original Checkmate that I don't know if we saw in other blockade games, or I think it might have varied between them, is that when a character dies, their trail totally disappears. I feel like we have seen some where the trail just kind of stays on there, but maybe I'm mistaken about that. So that is the basic gameplay for those 2. Now moving on to the next cartridge, which was Seawolf and Missile. Seawolf, of course, a very recognizable game. It's a pretty good version of Seawolf on this, although it's definitely not as detailed and not as cool. But I think a lot of that's because the original Seawolf arcade cabinet was aided a lot by the incredible peripherals it had and the cool targeting scope that showed up on top of the screen. Mm-hmm. But in this version, it still does have ships exploding. It doesn't have the little sinking sprite that the arcade cabinet does, and the torpedoes don't get smaller as they go up the screen like they did in the arcade cabinet. But other than that, it's a pretty faithful recreation of Seawolf. You're shooting up to the top of the screen, ships are passing by, and you're just hitting as many as you can. This version is a 1 or 2 player version, and you can set the total time limit in this. It's a little confusing because the opposing ships vary between the 2 colors, which are the same as the player. So when I was first taking a look at it, I thought it was like, don't shoot the yellow ships, but shoot the orange ships. But really, you can just shoot anything to get as many points as you want. And then there's also mines floating across the screen that block your way, and they're worth 0 points. And this nice detail that I didn't notice in the first Seawolf, where the fastest ship shows on screen and this little siren plays. The sound is a little bit different, but it's in this version as well, which is really nice. And you can only fire 4 shots, and then you enter a state of reloading for 4 seconds. The next game on this, Missile, we don't think is based directly on another Midway game. We couldn't find anything that looked like it. And also, it's basically exactly the same as Seawolf, except it's a surface-to-air missile shooting at planes. So you could say it was maybe inspired by Guided Missile or older electromechanical games like Sammy that Midway made, but it seems more like just kind of a reskin, if you can call a game this old a reskin of Seawolf to fit on the same cartridge, which makes a lot of sense. It's got different quote-unquote sprites, since we're a little fuzzy on the terminology, since this rendered its graphics slightly differently than other consoles. But it also has the colors and basically the exact same gameplay as Seawolf. The main difference is that you can shoot as many shots as you want. You don't have to reload in between every 4 shots. It's just that your current shot has to be off of the screen to be able to shoot again. So with all that taken into account, it's time to rate it. And I tried to talk about each game as I went through it, because I'm sort of rating this all as one. But if you couldn't already tell, it's basically really good. So for the graphics of this, I gave all of them a 3.5 out of 10. I would say that Gunfight and Checkmate both look better than the original arcade cabinets, which is really impressive for a console. And I think Seawolf and Missile are pretty close to the Seawolf cabinet, but they're missing a couple things that the cabinet did better. The game looks like it runs smoothly. Color, of course, is this huge welcome addition, even though it is pretty simple with only 4 colors per game. but the variety of colors between the different games is also really good. So it's not just like every single one has blue, red, green, and white. Sorry, looking at you, Fairchild.
Right.
And I think that the sprites all look really good too, and they're pretty well detailed. We're dealing with more pixels on the screen than the Atari, so they can fit a lot more detail in there. It does seem like the cowboys are pretty big like they were in Gunfight, but they do look really good. And it didn't really mess with the gameplay as much as I thought it would. So overall, I think it's has higher fidelity than the 2600. 2600 might have had a smaller pixel size on the display. I don't know. I don't know much about that because there were some images where I thought the 2600 looked better, but really the Astrocade just has a pretty noticeable amount more detail in its visuals.
Yeah, the 2600 had like a variable resolution. So depending on what the game was, I think it could go up quite a lot. On average, I'd say it's lower.
Okay, that makes sense. And then moving on to the sounds, I gave it a whopping 4 out of 10. All of the games that Midway put on this console are from 77 and 76 arcade cabinet releases. And it's so impressive to me that they're basically able to get very close or identical sounds on a home console only 1 to 2 years after those original arcade cabinets released, especially compared to what we're hearing on home consoles at the time. There's some more simplified or different sounds in Seawolf and Gunfight, but there's still music in Gunfight, torpedo noises in Seawolf, and then all those beeps from the typical like blockade game in Checkmate. So it's just this crazy variety of sound that I really was not expecting from a home console. And moving on to gameplay, I gave it a 3.5 out of 10. There is some customizing of games with the time limits and score limits, but this is sort of missing the huge swath of alternate modes that the Atari's 2600 had. But the games do run really well on this, and given the fact that just between the games themselves there's a lot of variety, it kind of makes up for it. I think Gunfight, Checkmate, and Seawolf all feel really different from each other, instead of it sort of being like the jet fighter versus tank games on the combat cartridge for the Atari 2600, where there's a decent amount of variation, but some of them feel pretty similar. And plus, I feel like Gunfight and Checkmate is just a really good deal for being included in the console. Of course, we don't know how much this console cost, but
actually, I found that out, Wes, as you were talking. Beautiful. I was like, I have to figure this out. So just to put it in perspective, the 2600 launched at $200, which is equivalent to $800 today, or about. But the Astrocade launched at $300, which is about $1,200 today. So this is a premium console.
Okay.
I'm sure it was less than a home computer, but it's like not too much less.
Right. And I think that is part of why we're seeing better capabilities with this too, is it blurs the line a little between home computer and console, since it could be upgraded into a personal computer as well. But as I was saying, Gunfight and Checkmate, they're pretty different games to be included on the same cartridge, and they're both a lot of fun. So I think it's really nice that you get that just with the console, even if you are spending $1,200 to get it. And moving on to relevance, I gave it a 8 out of 10. It feels like it's the first real competitor to the Atari 2600 that we've seen. And I don't know how well it's going to do, but just as far as its performance, it's already kind of beating the Atari 2600 in a lot of places.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it's super relevant since Bally drops it in 1979, but it is still sold by another company until 1983. So even if it wasn't that popular, or if it didn't sell well, I do think it's relevant in the fact that it just kind of shows other companies are making stuff just as good as Atari at this time. So overall, that leads me to a 3.75 out of 10, sort of for the console, sort of for those games. The console is just fantastic, really. It feels so good to see something on par with the 2600 and to not be like, oh yeah, this is good, but not as good as Atari, of course. It's like, no, this is just good and better in a couple different ways.
Mm-hmm.
It plays all Midway games that feel pretty damn close to their arcade counterparts. I'm just really impressed that they were able to do this with games that only came out a year ago in an arcade cabinet. It's got sounds, visuals, the gameplay's great, and I'm excited to see some of the later releases. They've definitely raised the bar. Like, next 2600 games that we rate, they're not just going to get a free pass.
Yeah, exactly. Man, that was a good little ending there, Wes.
Thank you. Yeah, and straight off the top of the dome piece, but
Wow, I'm glad you liked them. I also had some great ones.
Oh yeah, I'm excited to hear about them.
Before I do, we do have an honorable mention cartridge here. Elementary Math and Speed Math and Bingo was a cartridge. Obviously, we don't really care about bingo and math games, so we're just going to mention it. Then let me get into the two cartridges that I kind of did a group reviewing of. The first cartridge has two games on it, 280 Zap and Dodgem. And then the other cartridge has Tornado Baseball, Tennis Hockey, and Handball. And I know what you're thinking. So let me just start by let me do the worst games first. I'll get them out of the way. So the worst game of these four, Dodgem. It's a speed race game, and it basically is exactly Speed Race. You're just a car on a track. You are just dodging cars that are coming down from the top. It does give you a pretty good sense of speed, I'd say. You've got the checkered pattern on the side that moves down to make you feel like you're going fast. And cars can come down 2 to 3 at a time. So there's a lot of cars. The cars themselves are a little bit smaller, and the track is a lot wider than traditional Speed Race. So it feels like you have a lot more room to go around and dodge cars. And in general, you can probably just hold down the accelerator button and just dodge left or right. But there are times when you have to like let go of the gas a little bit. You'll fall down the screen, and then you can dodge with a little bit more room that way. But it's essentially everything we know. There is a quote unquote speedometer, which I thought was really interesting and cool. Dodgem was a Midway game that we didn't cover because it was a clone of Speed Race. But it has a speedometer, like apparently goes up to 240 miles an hour, which it doesn't feel that fast. But and then it also has a counter in the bottom that counts how far you've gone. But I think it's just a one-player game, and it's just a normal-looking speed race. The cars, they look good. They look a little bit like Matchbox cars, but it's nothing too crazy. The background on this one is a very strange pink color. Which is an interesting racetrack color, but it's okay, I guess. I don't have any real problems with it. So moving on. The next worst game is 280 Zap. It's a clone of Night Racer, or I mean, the original arcade game was a Night Racer-esque game, or a Night Driver game, and yeah, this is pretty cool to be on a console. I did not think that this could be possible on a console, to be honest. For those of you who don't remember, Night Driver or Night Racer is a first-person driving game with just these like pylons in front of you that kind of show you the track, and depending on if the pylons are moving, you'll know that a turn's coming up. But it does a really, really good job for first-person racing to give you that sense of speed. That's all what it's about, and is pretty faithful to the arcade version. I mean, you get a lot of speed in this one too. The tracks are pretty winding and turning. I'd say like graphically everything's bigger. Like the resolution's not quite as good, but there's absolutely no frame rate issues whatsoever, and that makes you feel like you're going really fast, which is crazy. And there's even like in the original Atari version, there was like a little overlay of a car at the bottom to give you like this kind of almost like looking at the hood of the car that you're driving in. And this one, it's like a true color hood that's just static, but it's still like a true color. car hood in the middle of the track that you're staring down. And there's also a working speedometer in this one as well. So it's pretty cool. I like it a lot. It's definitely more advanced than I was anticipating. It looks pretty hard, to be fair, but I think it's a pretty cool one. And then getting into the next one, Tornado Baseball. This was a crazy version of Baseball West. Absolutely insane. It's Tornado Baseball. I mean, you just played Double Play not too long ago.
Right.
It's just like that, but it's in true color, first of all. It plays identical. The sounds, they don't have all the sounds that you want. I forgot to say, by the way, that both the racing games had engine noises. It wasn't like the best I've ever heard, but still, we're on a console and it's not just like Pong noises.
Right,
so I was
exactly.
pretty happy. So that was pretty cool. But then for Tornado Baseball, it's in true color, which I don't know if I've played a baseball game in true color that looks this good. You have the whole outfield, infield pitching. Unlike, I think, Double Play and Tornado Baseball, I certainly don't remember this, but the pitcher actually holds up his arm before he throws and then throws it. So there's a little animation for pitching, which I don't remember that in the original. There's also great animations for, all the people coming on and off the field. And also when your character runs around the bases, it has an animation for the running, which I did look at that, and the original did have that, but I guess because the character is a little bit more blocky here, the animation is much more noticeable because it's a lot bigger. But in addition to all that stuff, it plays a 9-inning game of baseball, which I thought was crazy. It's exactly what you want if you're playing with your buddy on a home console, I think. Just in general, it looks really good. And obviously no frame rate issues whatsoever. To have the animation for every single batter, or batter and fielder, it's crazy. The ball moves very fluidly. You've got the whole strikes, balls, outs, inning, the score. It's all there. So there's no midway that lights up when you hit the ball certain places, but
you can live without that.
Yeah. But that's Tornado Baseball. And then the best game of these four, Wes, can you believe it? Tennis, hockey, handball.
Wow.
And I'm being serious about this. Let me tell you why, because this blew my mind. So imagine tennis, it's Pong. Now this version is Odyssey Pong. So you can move horizontally with your paddle, quote unquote. But instead of paddles, you actually have people, which we have seen on the Odyssey 500. It did that, like sprites of people, but there's a difference. These people are animated and they move their legs when you move.
That's what I thought you were going to say, and that's insane.
I know. And dude, when there's no paddles and you're playing tennis, it doesn't feel like you're playing tennis anymore. I mean, or it doesn't feel like you're playing Pong anymore. It feels like you're playing tennis.
Right.
Because you're watching people run around on a court batting this ball back and forth. I don't know. It completely changes how I feel about the game. And it's such a simple thing. And hockey and handball are the exact same thing. So, you're dealing with multiple figures for hockey, for instance, but they're all moving and they're awesome. And having your little paddle be animated is so cool. So super cool. You've got pretty nice graphics for the backgrounds, are all different colors for all these. And there's obviously score, and it's just by far, I think, the best version of Pong that we have ever played, period.
Wow, there you go.
And that's crazy. I mean, I'm not saying it's changing the world, but it's pretty cool. So I'm pretty happy with that one. When I saw that, I was like, oh my gosh. I mean, I love just having sprites and not paddles. I was already sold at that point.
Yeah, for sure.
But the animation's crazy. All right, so let's get into my scores. Pretty similar to yours, Wes. I gave a gameplay of 4 out of 10 because I really loved my games. I mean, tennis, hockey, handball are the best versions out there. Tornado Baseball is arguably better than the arcade machine game because it's in true color and plays 9 innings for free. 280 Zzzap is maybe And Dodgem, I'd say, is maybe a bit of a downsize to the original arcade cabinets, but those are still really hard games to get right. And the one thing that this console does that can't be understated is that there's no lag whatsoever. And when you're playing speed games where you're trying to go as fast as you can, it's really important that it's not getting all choppy, and they look good. So I think in addition to like Gunfight and Checkmate and Seawolf, the lineup is just crazy. So
Yeah.
gameplay 4 out of 10. Graphics I also gave 4 out of 10. Again, the one that really actually took me away was tennis, hockey, handball with the graphics. Tornado Baseball also has crazy graphics, and this is the only console that has a Night Racer type game on it, and that's because it's really hard to do. So yeah, graphics look good. Everything looked really good. For sound, I didn't have music in any of mine, so my sound's a little lower than yours. I gave it a 3 out of 10. You do have engine noises for the driving games, which is great. And also, Tornado Baseball has a cheer noise when you get a home run or something, which is really cool. But otherwise, the noises are pretty generic-y Pong sounds. Like, for instance, when you hit the ball and you get an out or something. I don't know, it's like a beep. But it was still really good. Especially the engine noises, have that on a console. The only time we ever really see that are for like first gen consoles that like they were made for racing games, for instance. So I really thought it was good. And then relevance, I gave it again, just like you, an 8 out of 10. The Bally Astrocade's really cool. You've already said it. I mean, the one thing I will say about it is that, and you mentioned this too, but the games, when you get a cartridge, you're getting like 2 games. Whereas when you get a cartridge for the 2600, you're getting like 30 games, kind of. I mean, they're variations, but I do think the 2600 is a little bit ahead in that respect. But for all intents and purposes, I'd say these consoles are pretty much equal in terms of what they can do. And now it's just seeing who's going to make the better games. And that's really exciting. And I think it's also maybe going to show Atari, hey, maybe we should make a sequel to the 2600 or something, because now we have competitors that are doing what we can do, but better as well. So I think it's just good for the whole industry, and it's going to push everybody. And overall, just like US, I gave it a 3.75 out of 10. It's really good. Really, really good. One of the best consoles that we've ever seen, if not the best. So I'm super excited to, get into some 2600 games and then revisit the Astrocade later this year and see where everything stands.
Yeah. It's going to be difficult to compare them. People listening at home, me and Ben did not talk to each other when we were reviewing these games. The fact that we have exactly the same ratings just kind of speaks to how solid this console is, I think.
Mm-hmm. I know, and I feel like all the games here, they're so unique. From baseball to racing to gunfight to checkmate, and they're all really good. Like, there's not like a really bad game here.
Yeah, like you said, all so different, which is why I'm still very partial to the gunfight checkmate combo, because it's just like those are completely out there from each other.
I know, but they're both probably really popular too.
Yeah,
it makes sense for them to sell the console with Gunfight, probably one of their best-selling arcade machine games. But any of these, I mean, people have heard of these names, so it's a really cool one. We'll have to continue to watch it. I'm really excited to see what happens when they start making like unique games for the console, which I know that they're going to do in this year. So not just ports of arcade machine games, and then seeing what those are like. But one thing's for certain is, and that's that this console has the power to do just about anything. So
yeah,
it'll be really fun to watch.
Absolutely. But before we end up talking about that console for the rest of the day, let's move on to the rest of our episode here. The next honorable mention that we have, moving on to the computer side of things, are Mystery Mansion and Acatone or Ashatun. I'm not sure how to say that. Both of which were text adventure games. They were developed over several years, and they had confirmed dates for 1981 for a later version of it, but we don't really know at what point in the development they were before then. We don't have a 78 version that we could look at, but we figured now was a good time to say them since they've been in development for several years, and we know that they're definitely coming out with a later version in a few years. And next up, a text game that I actually took a in-depth look at called Stugan, aka The Cottage, which came out in 1978 for the DEC 10 mainframe computer, and very specifically, a version of that computer in the Stockholm Computer Center in Sweden. So this is one where we know the first playable version of it was in 1978, but it was only available on this mainframe computer at that time. And it was created by two brothers, Viggo and Kimmo Eriksson, and their friend Ali Johansson, who were all 12, 10, and 14 years old, respectively.
Wow.
Yeah, so very impressive. All young kids who are coding this. They had all made games before, just like simple slot machine and other types of games in BASIC. So they had some previous programming experience. And they actually had access to this mainframe computer because I think Johansson's father worked at the Stockholm Computer Center. So they were able to, like, I'm going to say remote in, but that's definitely much too futuristic term for what they did. I think they were able to, like, through a modem, get access to it because they probably also lived close to it or something like that. Apparently you did have to pay for time on it though. So they would only like program in the evenings because you didn't have to pay for it then when it wasn't like working hours. So they made it for this mainframe computer, this text game called The Cottage, and a bunch of scientists at the computer center played it, and it sort of had this cult following specifically at that computer center. And it wasn't available for home computers in the US and worldwide until 1986. But since we do know that there is a version of it, the original version was available in 78. That's why we're going to talk about it first now. They did have some difficulty when programming it, getting the program to understand and respond to Swedish words, because I guess the basic language is the language that was created in English, and I don't know how that translated over. But they did actually do some interesting stuff where they play tested it with friends and families to find out what words people used to try and solve specific problems or to try and get the computer to do certain things. And then he would add those words so that it was more user-friendly for anyone who just picked it up and played it. And they also apparently were able to collect data on the commands that people entered into the program that the computer didn't understand. So they could say, oh, we want to add that word so the computer knows, like take or get, even though those would probably already be operative commands already in it. And the last thing is that this game was heavily inspired by Colossal Cave Adventure and takes place in Småland, Sweden, which I'm probably butchering the pronunciation of. So getting into the gameplay for this, you're exploring a surreal cottage in the middle of Sweden that's like doesn't really follow the rules of nature and reality. It's just like very out there. And the surrounding area has a bunch of puzzles that you can solve, as well as inside the cottage, which is, looks like a cottage, but it's like this 9-story thing with an elevator on the inside of it, which is on purpose. It seems like they kind of theme it as being surreal. It's not just like it doesn't make sense because they were younger when they were making it, so that's interesting. But basically, like every other text adventure game we're seeing now, you just gather treasure to get the highest point value that you can. And you gather treasure by solving puzzles, which is basically picking up items and using them to solve things in different rooms. An interesting thing about this is that since there's a outside and inside map where you can move around in, both inside and outside the cottage, the directions move from cardinal directions of north, south, east, west when you're outside to like relative directions of forward, backwards, left, right, up, and down when you're inside, which is a little disorienting. You can also ask for help in some of the rooms, and it'll give you a hint, but it reduces your overall score. And basically just walk around and solve puzzles. So getting into my ratings for this, for graphics, I gave it a 0 out of 10, maybe a 0.5. I don't know. Probably a 0 because there is like a title screen thing of like the Cottage, except it's upside down in like ASCII characters, which is kind of neat. But I don't know what version that was added in. There's nice descriptions, but there's no actual visual representation.
Mm-hmm.
For sound, same thing. Text adventure, no sound, so 0 out of 10. Then for gameplay, I gave it a 1.5 out of 10. What I like most about this is the very weird theming of just like, what is it, like satyrs and knights and a whole bunch of other crazy stuff being inside this cabin for some reason. And it does seem like it has some really cool puzzles. The inside directions get really confusing. It doesn't seem like they're relative to the door that you entered in. So I'll be like, go right, enter through the room. And then I'll say, go left or like go backwards. And it'll take me back to the same room when like I think another direction should take me back to the same room. So it's hard to wrap your head around, which I think is why CRPG Addict and other people who have played many of these games map them out when they go through them. But frankly, I wasn't about to do that. So,
do you have any examples of like a puzzle or anything?
So there is a puzzle where there's a slot machine where you have to gamble. To be able to gamble, you need the shoe of a fawn. And like 3 rooms ago, a fawn runs away from you and drops his shoe or something like that. But as far as the puzzles I encountered, I wasn't able to get too far in it. I found a deflated kickball. I found a laurel wreath, which I believe is like the thing that Julius Caesar and typical Romans wore on their heads. Or I guess it's the symbol of laurels in the shape of a wreath. But either way, grabbed both of those, found the lift, and I said, well, you got to go to the maximum floor first. Go to floor 9. Why not? And then there was just a knight with a bejeweled halberd guarding an ornate gate that was locked. And I kind of fumbled around for a bit, but then got lost and couldn't find a way into it. So I think there's puzzles to get up there. I couldn't steal the halberd from the knight or anything like that, unfortunately. And sometimes these get over my head. I do want to be fair to the game. I'm sure there's a lot of content I didn't get to. But the main reason I'm giving it a lower gameplay score is just that the commands didn't seem super intuitive to me either. Part of it could be that I was trying like too complex sequences of words. But there was a couple things I tried where like I couldn't talk to the knight, and I didn't know if that was supposed to be an option. But I have seen other people, like CRPG Addict, who have played a lot of these games, say that the descriptions for the rooms tend to be really simple in this game, so it kind of makes it easy to know what the important objects are. Like when I went to the 9th floor, I noticed all it said is like there's a knight and a gate. And it's like, okay, so I know that I need to do something with both of those to be able to proceed. But moving on to my relevance, I gave it a 7 out of 10 just because it is incredibly well documented. It will be released for computers in 1986, so it feels really important. I don't think it's the most revolutionary of text games, but it's probably the earliest Swedish created game. It's made by a group of kids, which I think is awesome considering the surprising level of polish for this like really big text game. And I also really like that they understood the limitation of text games, not understanding a bunch of different commands, and they actively tried to improve on that by, working with their family and friends to find out which words they would use to enter and stuff like that. So I think it's just an interesting, we have a good look at what their development process was, where we don't get that with a lot of these computer games. And we can see that they were actually doing like, user study group kind of things, or a focus group kind of things.
Mm-hmm.
So then overall, I gave it a 1 out of 10, just because, I really like the theming, and it has a really cool backstory to how the game was created, but it is still just a very simple text adventure game. I do think it's huge, and I think if you like this kind of game, this is probably a good one to check out because it has a lot of stuff to do in it. But there just wasn't all that much to pull me in, especially with the directions getting me kind of confused.
Sounds like the lore aspect was sounds confusing to me anyway as well.
It is, yeah. And I think a lot of the text adventure games of this time are, but also part of why it's interesting. It's just this really weird like cottage in the middle of nowhere where crazy stuff's happening.
Right.
Yeah, so that is Stugan, aka the Cottage.
Okay. Aren't you glad Adventure came out last Colossal Cave Adventure, and now we're reaping the rewards of all these text adventure games everybody wants to do.
I'm going to need to get good at playing them at some point, or else I'm never going to give one of these a fair shake.
That's okay, though. Let's move on. We got a couple honorable mentions and then my final review. This next one's called Bugs and Drugs by Paul Alphil, among others. It apparently was released in 78 and was apparently like a D&D game in Play-Doh that was more of a training game for doctors than a D&D game, but it appears to have been lost, so we don't really know too much about it other than it was on Play-Doh at some point.
And then next we have Zirkus by Mirko, which would have came out April 26th of 78, but it might not exist. We know that it was shown at a convention but never went into full production. But based on the name Zirkus, it was probably a clone of Circus by Exidy.
I think that convention was on the 26th.
So the convention was on there, but never went into full production, right?
Yeah. Moving on into May now. So getting into some May arcade games, we've got Dawn Patrol here by Mirko, which is a company that can do good things sometimes. But Dawn Patrol is some sort of World War I biplane type game, maybe similar to Biplane by Fun Games or Jet Fighter by Atari, but we don't have a lot of info for it, just a flyer.
And then last for our honorable mentions, we have Block C and TT Block C by Taito, which came out in May of 78. It looks like another version of TT Block by Taito, which was a breakout clone. So we don't have much info on it, but probably just added different game mode or some new features, something like that.
Mm-hmm. And then the final one for today, we've had a lot of prototypes so far this year, and there is another one that I'm going to be doing right now called Wolf Pack, again by Atari. I think Atari's just so big that people have gone back and looked for these prototypes, that never released and interviewed, the developers who worked at Atari at this time, and I've tried to find out every single thing that Atari could have possibly made, and Wolfpack is one of those. This one actually has like no information on it that I could find anywhere. It's on MAME, so it's emulated. There's videos of it. I don't really know where it came from. I did find one secondary source with a picture of a periscope peripheral that was apparently supposed to be used on it. Again, I don't know where they found that. So this one's got some mystery around it, but the game is really weird, and it's a fun one to talk about. So Wolfpack is kind of like a Seawolf style game. That's kind of its core. You're looking down a periscope apparently, and you're firing missiles at these ships around you. But there's two really big gaming concepts about this game. The first thing is that there is a slight perspective shift going on. It's kind of like Starship 1. In Starship 1, a spaceship would be far away and then it would kind of zoom past you, get really, really big in size and zoom past you. In this game, the ships will appear at the horizon, then kind of float towards you and get really bigger and then float away and then leave the horizon again. In addition to that, the playfield is, I guess it's supposed to simulate being kind of 360 degrees around you, so you can just keep like looking to the right forever and things will keep spawning from one of the two directions, but it's not like it's a static thing where they just appear in front of you and then you shoot it. That would be boring. So usually they'll start appearing like off the screen and you're like looking around to try to find them. Oh, there's one. It's like leaving the horizon now and I'm going to go grab it or whatever. So the combination of them kind of seemingly spawning off screen sometimes and you have to go hunt for these ships and the fact that they are getting closer and further away, it's a really cool little mechanic. And the perspective shift means that the sprites are slowly getting bigger and then smaller again as they move. So it's not just it's not just a trick. Like the sprites are actually changing sizes and stuff. So it's pretty cool. But that's the one big feature about it. The other big feature is that this game apparently is the first ever game to have an emulation of a voice sample. It has a voice sample in the sound. So when you fire, you hear a robot going like, fire 1, fire 2, and you hear like a robot voice say that when you fire something. I've got no clue why they did that. but it's the first ever game to have a voice sample. It doesn't sound like a human; it sounds like a robot. It's kind of hard to think about how they would even make that,
Right.
but it's in the game, and it plays instead of a fire sound, so it gets on your nerves a little bit. There's no other sounds in the game, but I don't know. It's pretty interesting. It's definitely different, that's for sure. Maybe it's the reason why it was a prototype. They just were wanted to see if they could do it. I don't know, but those are the two main big things about the game. So let me get into the gradings. For gameplay, I gave it a 2.5 out of 10. It's pretty fun hunting for ships. Like I mentioned, they can spawn off screen, and that means that you really feel like you're hunting for them, and I like that. Some of the ships are pretty small and they come in and out of focus really fast, and then other ones are like huge oil tankers and they're like free points, which always feels good to get them down. But I think it's just a fun game. You know, I'm not opposed to Seawolf type games, especially if perspective and seemingly kind of an infinite playfield or like a 360-degree playfield is part of the gameplay as well. So, and also because of that, I want to mention once you fire a shot, since it fires kind of straight from you and then you turn the camera, it actually like turns the shot so it looks like it's towards the left now if you looked right.
Oh, nice.
So that's a really nice little feature to help sell everything. And then for graphics, I gave it a 2.5 out of 10. The main issue with the graphics is that this is all in black and white, which I guess is, I mean, I think every prototype game we've done from Atari has been in black and white, so maybe that's just like the last thing that they do with prototypes is add color or an overlay or something. But it's in black and white, so we have the sea is like a gray and then the sky is black, and ships are like a lighter gray on the sea. Some of the really nice things about the graphics, though, other than that, just the perspective change, but the actual torpedo shot looks really nice. It has kind of like a trail of bubbles that kind of like leave the end of the missile, which is just like a bunch of like white specks. But I think it actually is a really nice effect. It lets you track the missile in a really nice way. There's also probably at maybe 3 to 4 different ship sprites for different kinds of ships you can hit. The explosion is really good. It's a really giant explosion. It looks like a nuclear warhead was dropped or something. And the whole screen flashes, which I know like isn't the best sometimes, but I don't know, I kind of like it. There is a little bit of weird flickering going on with the ships. I'm not quite sure why that is. I don't think it's like the emulation's fault, but it could be. But I think it's partly coded in the game whenever they're like changing sizes of the sprites. It's not like instantaneous. It's like it goes away and then the new one comes in for a second. So that is a negative, but in general, I think it looks really good. For sound, I didn't know what to do with this. I gave it a 3 out of 10 because it's the first game to have a voice sample. Of course, it didn't come out, so it's a little hard to say, but it's certainly, I've never heard anything like this before in a game up until this point, and it's pretty cool. I think there's 2 samples. One says, fired shot 1, and the other says fired shot 2. So I guess you can, you've got kind of 2 missiles you can fire, and then you have to wait to reload, I guess. But I don't know. It's pretty fun, for sure. It does get on your nerves after a full gameplay,
Right.
but it's okay.
Fire 1. Danger, danger, enemy close. Fire 2. Fire 1. Fire 2. Fire 1. Fire 2.
And then relevance, I gave it a 6 out of 10. This is doing a lot of stuff, and even if it never comes out, I have to imagine that it's still influencing Atari internally with other projects. I mean, we're dealing with perspective, we're dealing with like a 360-degree motion of the camera, we're dealing with voice samples. Even though the game didn't come out, these things will inevitably come up in the future. So it has to influence some things. It's doing too much new stuff or right on the edge of technology things for it to not influence stuff. So I thought it was somewhat relevant. And then overall, I gave it a 2.75. It's a pretty good game. Pretty good Seawolf game. Anytime we have perspective or a play area that turns, I'm going to be pretty happy. And then the graphics are like pretty decent, even though it's black and white. And we've got a weird sound voice sample that I don't know how the emulation guys acquired all this information, but it's pretty weird, but it's cool. And that's Wolf Pack. Again, we don't really have a release date necessarily, but I know it was developed around 1978, so good time to talk about it.
Nice. It's going to be interesting. I really hope we next couple Atari games over the next few years, we could say, I wonder if that came from Wolfpack, like, because like you're saying, this is, even if this didn't work out, some pretty cool technology that they have in this.
Yeah, I think so too. And the game is good. It's worth playing, I think. So go check it out. It's in MAME. And it works pretty well. So that'll do it for us today, though, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. And the Bally Astrocade is so good. We had so many great games, and these aren't even the best ones. There's going to be more coming up later in the year. Stick around for that. Wes did Stugan, which was a little bit more weird than I thought it was going to be. Sorry about that.
No. It's fine.
And then Wolf Pack, which is a very weird but cool prototype by Atari. So hope you enjoyed it.
And as always, make sure to check us out on Twitter. We'll post any updates about our episodes there. Check out our website where we have visual look at our timeline so far and everything that we've been going through, and we keep updating that. And also send us an email if you have any questions.
And check out my new music video, which I posted to YouTube just a couple days ago.
Absolutely. Ben shredding on guitar and any other instrument that you can think of.
Yep. Until then, we'll catch you in the next one.
See y'all next time.